Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Pewaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
From Apuant Productions and WUWM, this is Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. My guest today is author Adam Chandler, and we're talking about his book Drive-thru Dreams. But first, a story. It's 1947, and you're Sheldon "Red" Cheney, standing in a parking lot in Springfield, Missouri, staring at a problem. Your restaurant is packed, but half your customers never even make it inside. They're circling the block in their Chevrolets and Fords, post-war America on wheels, unwilling to abandon their cars for a burger. You need to bring the food to them. 2,000 years earlier, a tavern keeper in Pompeii faced a different version of the same problem. The streets teemed with Romans and others the empire had swallowed up as it had swelled. Soldiers, merchants, plebeians rushing between commerce and farming, empiric duty or their master's service, and none with kitchens in their cramped insulae apartments. You can't bring food to their wagons and carts and their dusty sandal-clad feet, but you can bring it to the street. Install an L-shaped stone counter, sink terracotta vessels called dolia into it, keeping the stews hot and the wine cold. Let them grab and go, standing right there on the Via del Abbondanza. The Thermopolia of Pompeii and your drive-thru window in Springfield, Missouri are separated by 2 millennia, but joined by the same truth. Empires move, and moving people need to eat without stopping. Rome built roads that connected 3 continents, 40,000 miles of stone engineering brilliance and ambition. America built highways, 35,000 miles of asphalt by the time you opened Red's Giant Hamburger in 1947. Both civilizations made speed sacred, and both demanded food to keep pace. Your innovation was simple, almost obvious in hindsight. A 2-way intercom, a window, a shelf. Order without leaving your car. The Romans had their garum spiced lentils and wine served in the moments to the masses. You have hamburgers and Coca-Cola delivered through glass. Different foods, same promise. Fuel for a people who cannot, nor will not, slow down. How could you know, Red, that within 20 years, drive-thrus would define American dining? That archaeologists would uncover those Pompeian thermopolia and recognize them instantly, not as ancient curiosities, but as ancestors. Speed, it seems, is the most enduring hunger. And whether you're feeding legions or sedans, the empire that moves fastest eats standing up or on the road. Welcome to Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. This is a show about culinary history, why we eat what we eat, the people, the places, the scenes and situations that set the course for the way we dine. Each show, we pick a thing, a person, a drink, a movement, or an object that made its mark on what we call food. The glorious sounds you're hearing are the drive-thru window at a Culver's on South 27th Street in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. For this episode of Classic Eats, I have guest Adam Chandler, who's written a book called Drive-thru Dreams. Chandler and I contemplate all things burgers and fries coming to you through a window.
This is 2 double deluxe today. It's going to be $14.72 at the window. Thank you. My pleasure.
How would you describe an Adam Chandler?
I mean, it sounds like a menu item, almost. Comparable to a Taco Bell Crunch Wrap in that it is kind of a mix of everything wrapped up in a tortilla and toasted and a little bit unhealthy, but also providing sustenance. If that
I
if that's
see.
me as a fast food item, otherwise I'm a journalist and author. I live in New York, but I travel a lot, and I write about food and business and culture, and uh, I have an unreasonable fascination with fast food.
Let's talk drive-through specifically. I'll give you a few contexts that I'm familiar with the evolution of the
Sure.
drive-through. So we know that in Pompeii, through the wonderful excavations they've been doing, there were these things that throughout the Roman Empire, I think they're called thermopolia.
Okay.
We're going to go with thermopolia. And even as far back as Mesopotamia, there's evidence that there were places for people who were traveling to kind of come together and get a quick sustenance and water and then move on. So, in my opinion, as long as we've been moving around, there has been some sort of location where you could essentially pull up with your horse, your cattle, your whatever, grab something to eat that was warm in some version, and then go on with your day. And to me, that's a drive-through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
But
one.
you're more of the expert. What do you think?
I mean, but yeah, the rise of convenience food, initially centered around trains before cars in a more modern context. Um, there were places that were familiar and chains that evolved in the late 1800s. But it wasn't until the Model T that we really became enamored of this idea of portability and food and driving and eating all at once. And from there, sure.
Go back. Wait, I want to stop you. Go back to the trains in the 18th century and that form of transportation and people moving around, because I wasn't aware that there were chains and that sort of thing that like get some sustenance here as you have a layover at this station and then go on to the next station or something of that sort.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. There were some early chains whose names escape me, but essentially they had familiar branding, and it was a place that kind of offered the same thing that what people are ultimately look for, a place to stop and eat before you go or while you're on the road that, again, you could kind of bank on knowing what was going to be served there, what it was going to cost. Um, that's something that we tend to kind of gloss over in the history because it wasn't the car, it was the train. But what we might imagine as being a modern day drive-through kind of existed. It was just attached to train stations or nearby those kinds of transit hubs. And that is something that I think a lot of people, don't know about, but there's still.
I mean, I'm a food historian, and I had no idea about that aspect of the drive-through's evolution and story.
Yeah, it's a question of whether it's the franchise or whether these people were actually being mobile because, yeah, they were going on trains, but they didn't have any say over where they were going, really. They were going from station to station as opposed to cars, which have this sense of adventure, right? The exploration, the roadside, all of these big motifs in American life, Route 66 and Southern California is the birth of the highway system and the birth of fast food in a lot of ways. Those are things that I think stick out more in our imagination than the more kind of traditional train movement, which cars ultimately disrupted and kind of killed.
So I know there's not one, like it's impossible to put a stake in the ground on this is where the drive-thru was invented, this is who first did it, that sort of thing. But there are several salient points along the way. And if you can list some of those, but more importantly, can you share just sort of the characters and the cultural and the thinking behind the evolution of this pull your car up, get food through a window, drive away, give money, drive away, and order through a box. That communication method, right, is really key to it being called a drive-through versus just a takeout window.
Right. Yeah, the takeout window is the beginning of this, and there are a couple of places that vie for the title of first technical drive-through window. There's a place in Texas called the Pig Stand. There's one left, I believe, in San Antonio, but for a while there were hundreds of them, and they kind of fashioned a window out of the side of their building, and people could order and receive food there. But that's that's a very primitive version of it, right? There's a
Right.
place called Big Red's Hamburg in Missouri that kind of stands in as that another version of that we could say is the closest thing we have to the most primitive version of the drive-through. But it was California. It was California in the post-war boom, where you had basically at the same time two big chains that we all know now, In-N-Out Burger, of course, and Jack in the Box. And what's interesting about it is Jack in the Box is named for the character that they put on top of the speaker box to make it more friendly and less ugly.
I always wondered because I thought this is a really off-market name for a burger joint.
It's off market for a burger joint, but it's also, if you think back to what the roadsides in California looked like in the 40s and 50s, they were trying to draw people in, to go to get off the road and eat at these places. So they had wacky designs. They had a lot of neon. They had this gogi architecture. They had these really interesting things that they used to pull people in. McDonald's used to have this mascot called Speedy, and he's a neon figure with a chef's toque, and he's bringing your food out quickly, and his name's Speedy because obviously they're all trying to convey how fast they are. In-N-Out is named because you go fast. In-N-Out. Sonic, another example of a chain that's named after speed. They really want you to think this isn't going to take a lot of time because you're on the road and you want to keep going, and so you don't want your food to take a long time. That aspect of it, the marketing of it, the excitement, the sort of spectacle of it is part of what makes it all very exciting. And the technology is a huge part of that. So we talk about In-N-Out and Jack in the Box. Both of these places opened as drive-through only spots. There wasn't inside dining.
Oh, wow.
There weren't really tables and chairs where people could sit and eat. The same goes for McDonald's hamburger stand. After it was a barbecue restaurant initially, it became a hamburger stand. And you took it to your car, or you stood around eating it, or you brought it somewhere else. And so the dining component of it wasn't central to the experience of the food until later on. And so Jack in the Box and In-N-Out Burger both designed these very kind of, one was a speaker box and one was just kind of a microphone. And you put your order in and you got it at the next stop. And it was prepared quickly, and there were small physical spaces. They were basically kind of commissary kitchens that were condensed. And it wasn't about the customer service, wasn't about having a place to sit and eat. It was about grabbing your food and going quickly.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Adam Chandler, the author of Drive-thru Dreams, and we're talking about fast food culture and the American drive-thru. As much of an expert on drive-thru as you are, you also became an expert on fast food in writing this book and in other foodway explorations. What did that In-N-Out Burger, Sonic, etc., Jack in the Box, what did that do to the food?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, just to start, we think about what the experience is. One of the big origin stories that people love is obviously because McDonald's is such a recognizable brand, but when you went to the McDonald's hamburger stand after not really trying a fast food place before that, what the McDonald's brothers did when they decided to close their profitable barbecue restaurant was get rid of car hops, get rid of plates and utensils and cups. So everything's wrapped in paper. That's the beginning of the experience. Right. Is that whatever it is you're eating, it has to be something you can wrap up into paper or something portable and take with you. And that immediately makes your menu different because you have to center it on the idea of portability. And even today, they talk about one-handed eating, one-handed driving, the concept of having something that won't completely fall apart while you're eating it. And that has driven a lot of the food in terms of just the configurations of the products they make. It has to fit.
Well, and I think of the restaurant aesthetic of, we eat with our eyes,
yes.
Right? That's almost thrown out the window, figuratively and literally, with this drive-through cuisine.
Right. It's not it's not meant to be the most beautiful. It looks good in the pictures, but the reality of what you're getting is obviously different. And again,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it, the convenience factor is something that isn't just about the speed of service, but the preparation of the food. Jacques Pepin, the famous French chef, has a great line about McDonald's and fast food more broadly when he was writing in Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People of the 20th Century. He named Ray Kroc one of them. And he said, people go to McDonald's not to dine, but to eat. And there's something really poignant in that idea of the kind of convenience culture and what sacrifices we make, not just in how we eat, but in how we live to be efficient, to have the most time we can to get where we're going, to work, to live. And we de-emphasize the food experience to do that in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. So how did it spread out of California? Understanding that no good idea lasts long in business and efficiency and cost savings. And then when there's money to be made with all those combined, of course, folks are going to embrace it. But how did it spread from California? Because there's been many trends in food that started in California that did not make it across the desert to the rest of the country.
Well, the difference is they were built off of the roads. So it was initially the highway system, the interstate highway system, which was was at the time the most expensive investment in infrastructure in American history, created this network of roads. It was something that changed the entire experience of being an American, city to city, in some cases, barreling through the hearts of cities. We created these highways and these roads. And fast food became a destination off of the roadsides initially. It wasn't something that popped up in cities initially. It was a suburb. It was a roadside. It was something that was meant to be convenient to the car. And that's, I think, what allowed it to transcend was because we became a car culture obsessed country after World War II. We had disposable income. We had steel rations and gas rations were gone. We had a baby boom. The roads created commutes and the rise of the suburbs. All of these things in that boom time were built on the idea of mobility and even psychic mobility, even psychological mobility. We're going to the moon. It's all about these big movements. And fast food was able to seem futuristic in this way that people were excited about. It was almost scientific. It was scientific.
You make such a good point that I've never put together, so I was born in '69. So I'm my generation was fast food and the drive-thru was really embraced culturally at that point. But so is the space race.
Sure.
I was born just a couple of months after, 5-6 months after we first landed on the moon. And so Tang, to me, for instance, or astronaut food, was fantastic. And from my parents' perspective, it was a great way to get nutrition into any kid. We landed people on the moon. Trust the technology, trust the movement, and trust all the foodways that come from it. So who were the early innovators? Like I'd always heard Hardee's or Arby's or somebody like that also adapted. There's an argument for one of the first or early drive-thrus, things like that. What is the Mount Rushmore of burger drive-thrus?
The Mount Rushmore of burger drive-thrus. That's a great question. Well, I honestly think Dave Thomas is one of the people that is kind of an unsung hero, even though he's well known.
Wendy's?
Wendy's fame, named for his daughter, Melinda Liu. Wendy's was created this version of the drive-thru where you ordered your food, and then you paid, and then you received the food. So you had all these steps along the way where some drive-thrus, you'd order and pay and receive your food at the same window. And it would take a minute. You'd be idling. But by introducing these steps along the way, Dave Thomas created a version of the drive-thru experience where you had these checkpoints that kind of kept you engaged. You never felt like you were wasting your time. You weren't impatiently pounding the steering wheel waiting for your food. You had a few dedicated steps. And his version was very influential for a long time. That's how people did it. And he was one of the big pioneers of it. And that's kind of what set Wendy's apart in a lot of ways in the early years, because Wendy's came about the year we were born, 1969. It was the first time it emerged on the scene. But the market was saturated and it managed to stand out by being different. And that was one of the ways, the operations of it. So I would put that at the top. I would put Harry Snyder, who is the founder of In-N-Out Burger with the speaker box, also on the Mount Rushmore of drive-thrus. McDonald's, obviously Ray Kroc deserves a lot. And, his Fred Turner, his operations guy, and Harry Sonnenborn, one of the kind of famous real estate executives who created the idea of the model of franchising the restaurants and owning the land and leasing it out, what was instrumental to this process. Because what McDonald's did was create this ubiquity. And the drive-thru is part of that experience. Breakfast at McDonald's in the 80s, 25% of all breakfasts eaten outside of the home were eaten at McDonald's. And this is the era of the drive-thru taking off. So those are my big figures. I wish I had more of a dark horse to pull out. I mean, I don't think people know a lot about the story of Harry and Esther Snyder with In-N-Out Burger, but it's a good story too. So those are the ones I think I'd pick.
So with that breakfast comment, do you think that things, in a way, at least in America with the drive-thru, have come full circle in world history where major Roman cities had designated, it basically is law by the governor that you have to have these spots at the main entries, these thermopylia, where people can pull up any time of day, more or less, morning through night, and get a warm something because they're part of the success of the city. And the inns or the way stations or that sort of thing through the Middle Ages, do you think it's just sort of come full circle that then at one point a huge amount of Americans, according to your statistics, were getting breakfast in their cars via a drive-thru at McDonald's?
Yeah, I do think there is a very full circle element to that, and that being part of being mobile and being ambitious and working. I mean, I think back even to the first White Castle in 1916 was initially a stand outside of a factory. Dunkin' Donuts was initially a place that served a bunch of different pastries and coffees next to a factory. It was started by a union guy who was an electrician. And this was always kind of hand in hand with the idea of people who are working hard and don't necessarily have the time to shop for food, to prepare food, to have something, that they've taken with them. And so there is that element of hurry and convenience and efficiency that has driven this.
That's our show. Thanks for exploring the world of exhaust fumes, burgers and fries, and all things drive-thru. Join us next time and take a seat at our table for Classic Eats. Would you please?
Listen, I'm here for it. Let's go.
Okay.
In 5, 4, 3.
Now I've got the giggles.
Classic Eats is created and hosted by Kyle Johnson Cherek and co-produced by Apuan Productions and WUWM.
Executive producers Kyle Johnson Cherek and Rob Schoonover. Audio editing and engineering by Brian Arkta and John Rymaszewski.
Special thanks to our guest, Adam Chandler, who described our editing process as...
They fried it after they prepared it. So it kind of congealed together in a delicious and disgusting fashion.
Thanks for taking a seat at the table with Classic Eats. You can hear this episode again and any others you've missed when you subscribe to Classic Eats, found wherever you listen to your podcasts.